All right, so my name is Robert John Hadfield, and I am the owner of Audiomover. And Audiomover is a company that takes your old audio and videotapes and converts them to digital. Okay, so when people ask me how the company got its start, I usually tell people that it was kind of an accident. And what I mean by that is when I was a younger guy, I was a professional musician. And so I had hundreds of audio tapes and videotapes, rehearsals, song ideas, performances. I even had a videotape performing in a high school talent show. And so when I built my first recording studio, I had all this professional equipment, and I thought, why don't I just convert these into digital just so they'll be preserved? I've been working with tape for so long, I realized that it deteriorates, and it'd be a good idea to get these things converted to digital so I'd have them permanently. And so I went through the process, and then as I was doing it, it occurred to me, I thought, I wonder if this could be a service, if there would be people that would want me to do the same thing for them. And so, now keep in mind, this is back in like 2000, 2001. What I did is I made a little website, and on this website, I just said something like, if you have old audio and videotapes, give me a call, mail them to me, and I can digitize them for you. And so what happened is over the next little while, I would just get these little packages. Somebody would send a tape in from somewhere, and I'd get this phone call, and this went on for a little while, and I thought, boy, maybe this could actually be something that could pay my electrical bill every month. Well, after we've been doing this for about, 6 months, a year, or somewhere in there, I get this phone call from somebody in California. And this person gets on the phone and he says, hey, I just saw this website that says you can take cassette tapes and turn them into digital. I said, yeah, absolutely. And he says, well, we have 1,000 cassette tapes we need converted. And I thought, why would somebody have 1,000 tapes? Well, it turns out what these were sermons. This was a church that had been recording their sermons. Little did I know that churches all over the place will record all of their sermons. A couple of them on Sunday, Wednesday, Friday, holidays, and then they would have these just boxes filled with cassette tapes, and they would want, and they're just sitting in some back room somewhere. So anyway, he told me that he had these 1,000 tapes, and I had no idea how we would do 1,000 tapes. But I said, oh yeah, sure, and I gave him a price, and he sent them over, and over the next couple of months, I figured out how to do 1,000 cassette tapes. And it went really well. Well, surprisingly, this actually started becoming really common, and over the next several years, we'd get calls from churches all over the country with 1,000, 3,000, 5,000. And we got really good at this, and then we started getting calls from government agencies, city, county, state, even some federal government agencies, and then historical societies and universities. We get 1,000 tapes from some research department in a university, and so we just got really good at moving large groups of tapes through the studio very quickly. And so then this went on for several years, and then it was in 2007 I got a phone call from somebody in New Mexico. And when this guy called and he says, so I'm looking on your website and I see that you can do you do these cassette libraries, you can convert them to digital. I said, yeah. And he says, well, I have a lot of tapes. And I said, well, we do a lot of tapes. We've gotten really good at this, doing a lot. And he goes, no, I'm actually talking about a lot of tapes. And I thought, well, what do you mean? And he says, I'm talking about, we have 115,000 cassette tapes that need to be converted to digital. And I thought, you what? And I responded to him and I said, well, you haven't scared me yet. Let's talk more about this. So we talked it over. After it took a few months, we negotiated and discussed this project, and then they finally sent it to us. We actually went to their facility and picked up these tapes. We did it in shifts, several over the space of a couple of years. And it ended up being just a really, really successful project. And it's the biggest project we ever did. And as far as I know, it's the biggest project of that kind that I think has ever been done in the United States. So over the years, we just continued to get these. And although we haven't done any that big, I mean, we did do one for the state of Minnesota a couple years ago, where it was like 30,000 cassette tapes and about 2,000 reel-to-reel tapes. So it was one of those things that we just got really good at and kind of carved a little niche for ourselves. Now, that isn't to say we don't do small groups of tapes, like because we really do get shipments from all over the country. People sending in just one tape, a videotape, a cassette tape, micro cassette, whatever. We have machines for all kinds of different media. But it's been a really interesting trajectory, and we've been doing this now for over 2 decades. We've had this going, and it's been really an amazing experience watching this company grow. And anyway, that's the origin story of Audiomover. So what is the best part about being an entrepreneur and a business owner? So I'm gonna give you 2 different things. One of them, the first thing, is creating jobs. It's a really amazing thing to be able to create jobs for people. And to realize that this thing that you've built is helping people make car payments and pay rent, buy groceries, and who knows what else. But that's a pretty neat thing, creating jobs and giving people opportunities to work. But specifically with the company Audiomover, what stands out to me with that is preserving history. And so of course we're doing people's personal audio tapes and videotapes, and that's kind of an awesome thing when you think about it, because you're preserving media that hopefully will be able to be passed down along the generations. So you'll have recordings of your grandparents and your parents and who knows what, but preserving these things so that people in the future will have them. But maybe even more broadly, when you look at some of the projects that we've done, where we've had several different projects from cities around the country that have gone and done historical research on their city, and they'll go interview people that have lived there, that know the history. And so they've captured all of these historical things related to a particular region in the country, and then they send them to us, and we convert them to digital. So that, and a couple of years ago, we were involved with digitizing a bunch of tapes that were part of a historical research project related to a former vice president of the United States. And when these tapes came into the studio, I was just amazed at the names on some of these tapes, these interviews. I mean, it was like a who's who of Washington, D.C. And these were tapes that had literally recorded these interviews with these specific people, and they'd sent them to us to archive them. And so it's that kind of thing where you realize you're part of something that's just bigger than yourself. And so realizing that this business that I have here and all the people that work here, we're a part of something that has the potential to last long after we're gone. And so that is, as far as being a small business owner, entrepreneur, specifically for this company Audiomover, that's a pretty awesome thing to be a part of. So what's the strangest thing that we've ever received in the studio? So how much time do you have? There's been so many interesting things that come through, but there are a couple that really stand out to me. And it's not that they were strange, because a lot of the stuff we get is just cassette tapes over and over again, and micro cassettes over and over, and VHS tapes over and over. One thing that was really kind of interesting was one time, this goes back quite a ways, but somebody was sending in a cassette tape, and instead of putting it in a padded envelope, they put it in a number 10 envelope. I'm talking about a white envelope that's like that you used to send business correspondence in these things all the time. So they basically put a tape in it, licked it shut, put a couple of stamps on it, and sent it to us. And it was kind of comical because when it arrived at the studio and we we opened up the envelope, it looked like it had been run over by a truck. And I mean, just this tape was just in just pieces. As we opened up the envelope and you look in, they were just filled with just pieces of plastic. The tape had just been utterly destroyed. Well, the good news is, of course, with a cassette tape, you can just take the reels out and put them in another housing and it works fine. But it was kind of an interesting thing because just being able to see how robust this old media is, even though it does deteriorate, it was amazing to see that come in and to see kind of the carelessness that somebody had with something that they wanted to preserve, and yet it still worked. Something else that happened that was pretty interesting was one day when the mail came in, one of the packages, we opened it up, and inside this package, and it actually, when I say package, it was just an envelope, a padded manila envelope. And we opened it up, and what was inside was a 78 RPM little record. And which was kind of amazing because they didn't put any kind of structural support in there, so it could have got bent and broken. Fortunately, it didn't. And there was a note inside that said this was a recording of these people's grandfather during World War II when he was in Europe. And apparently he'd gone to a fair or something where you'd speak into a thing and it would record your voice on a record, and he'd done that and then mailed it back to the United States to his family. And it was, what was so amazing about it, it was amazing to get something like that had been, in Europe during World War II and to have that kind of historical significance. But what was even more amazing to me was that we had never even been called that the package was coming in. Back then we didn't have an online order form. I mean, this is like 17, 18 years ago. And so people would just fill out an order form that you'd print on our website, and then you'd put in your package and mail it to us. And you would think there was something that's irreplaceable, that was that important, that you'd at least call and see if we're really there. Because really all we were was just an address. Who knows, And so these people, for whatever reason, had enough trust that they put it in this package, shipped it off, and yes, we were there, and we digitized it for them. But that was a really amazing thing, that people in this world have such incredible trust with something like that, and trust the things that they see online and the businesses, and it was really neat for us then to be able to help preserve this thing for their family that was really kind of an heirloom. One of a kind recording of somebody back in the 1940s. So anyway, that was a pretty neat thing. And one other, and I've told this story so many times, but this one really, I don't know, it really got to me for some reason. We got a package, and inside this particular package was a little microcassette. They were like cassette tapes, but they were much, much smaller. People used them for dictation and that kind of thing. And answering machines. They were really common in answering machines back in the 80s, 90s. And inside this package was a microcassette, and it actually talked about where it came from. It said, "This is a priceless recording of our grandmother who passed away some time ago, and this is the only recording we have of her voice." And it was taken out of an answering machine. And so we took the tape and we put it in the machine, we started playing it, and I usually will sometimes just put some headphones on just to listen to make sure that the audio is working, and then we don't have time to sit and listen to tapes, so we'll just get it started and then walk away. But this tape was so short that I didn't have that I heard the whole thing. And what it was from an answering machine, like I said, and what it was this grandma, and the words that she said was something like, "Hey kids, this is Grandma, I love you, goodbye." That was it. that was the message on the machine. That was what we then captured. That was the only recording of their grandma, their only recording they had of her voice. And for some reason that really struck me. That here's this person, I don't know how old she was when she died, but this entire life that she'd lived, and the only media, the only thing they really had to remember her by, to listen to her voice, was, what was that, 9 words? That's it. And it was from an answering machine. So that just, for some reason, that really got me thinking, like, just kind of what kind of legacy, what are you leaving behind when you leave, when life is over for you? What have you left behind as a legacy? Or do people know you? Do they remember you? What kind of impact did you have? And that there was something that really, really got me about that project. Anyway, those are a few of the things that were pretty interesting that had come into the studio. Yeah, reel-to-reel tapes. We have several different reel machines, and it was a really popular format actually for a long time. Just wasn't so much. A lot of consumers had it, but it was never as big as, for example, cassette tapes. But we've done some really amazing reel-to-reel projects. There was one that we did, I can't remember what city it was, but it was the city's symphony. And they had all these concerts recorded from years and years and years, and they needed to get these things digitized and archived. These tapes, once again, tapes deteriorate, they don't last forever. And they sent these things in, and I remember actually listening to some of these things. It was beautiful listening to these recordings that they had of this symphony of this big city. And I think it was someplace in California. But that was pretty neat to be able to be a part of something like that. This years and years of a symphony playing this incredible music, and being able to bring that into our studio and digitize that it could be enjoyed, archived in such a way that people would be able to enjoy it for forever. How do you succeed with competition? And that's an interesting question for us specifically, because the truth is we were doing this work long before any of the competition that we have in the marketplace today. And so that actually has given us an advantage, just because we were here way before they were. I mean, Google has had us indexed for over 20 years on their servers. So we're kind of a stable standard. So we do our business pretty differently than a lot of these newer companies do. And I think maybe one of the things that's been an advantage for us too is not just the longevity, but because the nature of this business. When I started Audiomover, it wasn't a business idea. I've actually kind of watched some of these other businesses as they come in and started getting into this, and they, they'll tell their company story, and in each case it just seems like an opportunity. Hey, here's something we can go make money doing. And it was never that for me. I started doing this because I was already in the business of working in studios. I'd been doing audio and video work my entire life. I mean, I started working in recording studios when I was, 15? And so this business was a natural outgrowth to the things that I already loved and I was already passionate about. And so it has given us an advantage over the years, because I'll get a lot of phone calls from people that have watched our videos, and they'll say, I can tell you know what you're doing, and so we want to send our stuff to you just because you seem like you know what's happening, and I trust what you're going to be able to do just based on listening to you talk. And which makes a lot of sense to me, because if I were going to be doing this, if I were going to be sending my audio and videotapes to somebody, I'd want to know that it wasn't just some business idea. It'd make me feel more comfortable knowing that this was actually a passion for the people doing it. And that really is the case. And I'll tell you, the people that have worked for me over the years, it probably drives them crazy, because I love this stuff so much. I'll go, they'll be working on something, they'll be digitizing tapes or working on something, or they'll ask me to help with something. Hey, come listen to this and see if we can fix this or make this work better. And then inevitably I sit there and talk for an hour about some tech thing related to the audio or hey, did you know that? But and I can't control myself because it's so interesting to me. It's really fun. So that probably has been an advantage. Being in business, having something that you're really, really passionate about, and as a result, you're usually pretty good at because you're so passionate about it. And that probably has been one of our biggest strategic advantages over the years. And while all these other companies that were already huge companies moving into this space and bringing this service on as an additional service in a huge company, how have we been able to compete against them? That's it. That's how, because we're good at it, and this is something that we're passionate about. And a lot of people in the world today don't necessarily just gravitate to the cheapest option and biggest company. You'll look around and go, well, this actually seems like they're better. Like these people actually know what they're doing, and so there are people that are willing to pay a premium for that, and not necessarily trust the big, huge organization. They'll trust a smaller company like ours, and that's how we can compete against some of these really giant companies that have kind of moved into that same space. Okay, this is going to sound so strange. Running this company has made me believe in the future more. And it's going to sound so strange when I explain this to you. So several years ago, I had this lady working for me. She was working one of the late night shifts. We've had times when we have so many tapes, we're literally going like 22 hours a day, and then we have a couple of hours set aside for backups and different things. And we would just have this rotating groups of people coming in and just moving these tapes through the studio. Well, there was one lady that worked for the company. This goes many, many years ago. And she was great. She was a great employee. She was very dedicated and was always on time and did great work. And she approached me one day and said, hey, I've got a son who needs a job. And would you be interested in potentially hiring him? And maybe, bring him in and let me meet him. And so she brought her son in, and I got to tell you something. I was really nervous because this kid, he was either 17 or 18 years old. He was actually pretty young, and he had just recently graduated from high school. And he it seemed to have just an attitude, like this young guy that didn't like older people, adults, and he just kind of had this thing that I don't know how to explain it, but just this teenage attitude about him, kind of like, that one of those things. At least it seemed like it to me. And so I reluctantly hired him, and I had him take over one of our early morning opening shifts. And so he was to come into the studio and open it up. I think it was 4:00 in the morning or something, and he'd work this 4 or 5 hour shift. So once again, I was reluctant about this, but we hired this young man. And I got to tell you something. Over the 20 some odd years of running this company, he is one of my favorite all-time employees. He was just awesome. And he always had that kind of teenage thing, about him. I don't even know how to explain it, but he was just amazing. He was so conscientious. He did such great work. He was on time. He was focused. I loved him. And it was interesting because over the years, we have had a lot of younger people work here. And I just think they've been amazing. They've been fantastic. They're like sponges at what they learn and very responsible. And it's been a real pleasure working with so many young people. And like I said, however strange that sounds, having this business a business that's specifically geared towards preserving the past has given me this view of the future, and looking at these people that are really half my age and more, and thinking there's a great future for our world, because I think some of these young people have been amazing. So anyway, that's kind of strange, but that's been a big learning thing for me. So no, personally, I actually don't listen to anything on cassette tapes anymore. I do have a huge record collection. Matter of fact, a couple years ago, right before COVID, I was invited to be a guest panelist at the Making Vinyl Conference in Los Angeles, and it was pretty interesting. Interestingly, they had me there to talk about cassette tapes and not vinyl. But I have a massive record collection, and for anybody that visits the studio, they'll see it. Right, so with so many companies that have just automated everything, especially communication, we just don't do that. When you're doing something that's so personal, like sending your audio and videotapes to somebody to get digitized, I mean, these are frequently one-of-a-kind things. And so people just want to hear a voice. They want to have that warm fuzzy, that connection that they've talked to us and feel good about it. And so we encourage people, call us. We'll pick up the phone, we'll talk to you, text us, whatever, but there will always be a human on the other end that will visit with you. And I think from a business standpoint, that's kind of an opportunity, isn't it? With so many companies going out of their way to take humans out of the process, then there's a lot of people that'll gravitate towards the companies that don't get rid of the humans. And because they do want to have that connection, that feeling that, okay, I've got this really important thing and I'm sending it to somebody. And it's not always just the personal part of it, where it's your own audio and videotapes. There are a lot of people that call us that have been given the responsibility. So for example, we get calls from people all the time, that younger people that work at a county government, that are part of a church, that are part of a library or something, that have been given a responsibility where somebody said, hey, we've got all these tapes. Will you be responsible for going and finding a company that can convert these to digital? And then you've got these kids that don't even really know what a cassette tape is. I've had this happen so many times. And they'll get online and they'll search and they'll call us and they'll say, hey, I've been given this responsibility to digitize, to preserve all these things. I've got these tapes. Do you know what this is? Yes, we know what it is. And let me talk to you about that. Let me explain it to you, and we'll give you some options, and we'll hold your hand basically to make sure that you get what you want, or help you take care of this. So it's not just always the personal things. It's a personal responsibility that you've been given, that you're trying to live up to, and we will help you take care of it and make sure that it gets done in such a way that your boss or whoever you're working for will be happy with the way the project got done. Right. So a lot of the bigger projects will come, obviously they find us in a Google search, but what happens next is actually kind of funny. And it's one of a couple of different scenarios. Somebody will call and say, so we have 5,000 tapes we need to get digitized, and we bought this piece of equipment, and as we started doing it, we realized that it's not as easy as we thought it was going to be, and it's really going to take us, we did the math, and it's going to take us about 4 years to get all this done. or it'll be, and this is really common, it'll be a church, and they'll have some parishioner that actually knows tech, or maybe he's the guy that runs their soundboard, and they're thinking, hey, I can do this for us. I'll just take the tapes home and we'll digitize them. And then, of course, 6 months later, they've only been able to get 10 tapes because they have a life and a job and all these other things. And then they realize that there's just no way they're going to get these 5,000 tapes digitized with this one guy in his spare time. And so then that's when we get the phone call. And that's actually, those two scenarios, that's actually happened a lot. And then, then of course we go through the process of talking it through. And what we've realized over the years is that this is not a one-size-fits-all thing. When you have these big libraries of tapes, there are options that we can talk to you about that you've probably never even thought of before, of how to archive them and what you need, because it may be different than what you think. And we can do some, anyway, we can talk these things through. And we usually, our goal here is to, if you've been given this responsibility to get this large library of tapes converted or transferred to digital, our goal is to help you get it done in a way that's going to best benefit and serve your needs. Okay, sure. So if people want to get a hold of us, you can go to audiomover.com. And of course, we have phone number, email, all that stuff. And if you call, we really will pick up the telephone and visit with you. And which is pretty important, because people like, when you're sending things off to a company to get digitized, people like to know, have that warm fuzzy. And so that's why we just encourage people, text us, call us. There'll be a human being that will talk to you about this, so you can feel comfortable where you're sending it. And anyway, we think I think that's pretty important.